So I think one big thing for my generation is sort of the whole concept of civil rights, you know? And even though I would say the generation before me, like in the 50s and 60s, that's when they fought for civil rights.
Yeah.
And they really acquired the legal rights to the civil rights. Like they got a lot of the legislation passed, and they did a lot of great things. My generation wasn't involved in that, but my generation was involved in the implementation of civil rights. So I really grew up in a place where we were trying out new things. So now the courts came in and they said, you know, desegregate the schools.
Yeah.
We're going to bus kids in. That happened in my school district.
Oh,
my school
okay.
district was desegregated in 1975. So when I moved to Wisconsin in 1979, so for middle school and high school, I was going to school in a district that had just been desegregated. So they bused in African American kids from the inner city out to our sort of more suburban high school. So they mixed the kids, and so that was a kind of a big deal for me. You can kind of get a glimpse of that in the movie Remember the Titans. Did you ever see that one?
Yeah, I've seen that.
So kind of like that kind of, I mean, it wasn't that intense. We didn't go through all of that drama, but, you know, integrating the schools was kind of a big deal.
Was there tension?
Yeah, I don't remember any. I never had tension. I mean, there's always the under the surface tension of kids walking around the hall and being racist and maybe not calling people out, but saying stuff to their friends or whatever. Okay, so there was always that.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of overcoming it is you got to mix, and yeah, it's going to be awkward for some people.
Yeah.
Or uncomfortable, and some people will even act mean, you know, or out of fear or whatever. But I think in my life, some of the biggest social moments have been race issues. Okay, so I'll give you a couple. All right. One are the LA race riots from 1992. Have you guys learned about those?
No, but I know what happened, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was like 6 or 7 days. I think 50-some people got killed. And it was right after the Rodney King beating.
Yeah.
So basically, an African-American guy got beat by these cops. I think they were all white LA cops. And someone videotaped it. And they didn't really have, I don't think, the internet to post it, but they it made it onto some TV stations. Okay, so it went viral that way through TV, and man, that city just rioted. It was crazy, and they didn't stop it until they brought in the National Guard or the California, the Reserve Guard. So that was intense. I remember watching that, and I was just out of college, and I was like, whoa. Something similar was 3 years later was in 1995, the O.J. Simpson trial. I don't know if you knew about that, but he grew up in San Francisco, actually, played football up there.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's an NFL, like, Hall of Fame type running back. And he was accused of a double murder against his ex-wife, who was Caucasian, and her friend, allegedly, or maybe a romantic friend, Ronald Goldman. So they were both murdered pretty brutally, you know, with a knife, and he was charged with that. And they did a poll that said that 80% of Caucasians thought he was guilty, but 80% of African Americans thought he was innocent. So the opinions of this case and this defendant was very racially drawn, you know. And so when they came out to read the verdict, they were the cops were on alert for a possible, like, there was rumors that there was going to be another riot 3 years later, you know, after the Rodney King beating.
Yeah.
So there was this whole like concept of like after the civil rights were passed in the late 60s or whatever, that like really in the 70s, 80s, 90s trying to implement it and trying to like bring people together, you know, and get people to live with each other, at least to tolerate each other, you know, and not hate each other. And then I'd say the third thing that was a big deal for me, so anyway, going back to Simpson, so when they read the verdict, like everybody at work stopped, like they all went into wherever the TV was. And same with my wife's work, same thing. And like, it's like the country stopped.
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the work day, in the work week, and everything just stopped, and everybody went to watch it. It was it was called the trial of the century, and it had a lot of intense, because it had a major entertainer and this football player. It was super high profile. It was very, all these race issues were involved.
Yeah.
And it was in L.A., which was even more intense, 3 years after the race riots. So I don't know why, but it just had all these ingredients that made it this really intense focus. So, and he was acquitted with I think there was 8 out of 12 jurors were African American. Then he was accused in a civil trial, and they moved that trial out of L.A. to Santa Monica, which is the suburbs, and he had mostly a Caucasian jury, and he was found guilty there.
Yeah.
So he had 2 different verdicts, but that was a big deal. And then I think just Obama being elected would be my last one. Was for me, as a guy who grew up in the post-civil rights generation, just to see our generation really had to implement and work on getting along with each other with different races, and to see him elected was, no matter what party you're in, for me it was special in that to see that over 50% of Americans would vote for an African American. I thought that was kind of cool. Like, it showed me that maybe 40 years later, a generation later, that maybe some of the civil rights was working. That you're not going to get along better together until you try. And I think the civil rights really made us try.
Yeah.
It sort of forced us legally, so that was good.